Introduce Mr. Dandamudi.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great honor to introduce our honorable guest for today, Mr. Nagendra Dandamudi, Director at AT&T. Sir specializes in interim management, transformation, or change management. He also has experience in CRM, customer service and operational excellence, business improvement and process reengineering, IT, including ITIL and communications. Sir has actively participated in people engagement and communications. He also has experience of strategic and business planning. Sir specializes in program management and works towards team building, culture, and leadership. Sir has lived and worked in the USA, Europe, and Asia Pacific. Sir's specialties comprises of sustainable business change, operational performance turnarounds, amongst many others. May I now invite our honorable guest, Mr. Nagendra Dandamudi, to take the stage and share his experiences with us. Thank you. Sir, the podium is all yours.
Where is it visible? Thank you to Seema Madam and the team that's put up the seminar, and for giving me the opportunity to be with you people today. Hopefully I will take you through some of my experiences and understanding of what's happening with this industry, my view and perceptions of what I see happening in the next couple of years. So it gives you an idea from your perspective. I'm sorry that my presentation is more technical in nature, but I didn't realize that we also have folks from finance and the other disciplines as well. So I'll try and articulate and try and make you relate to some of the changes in technology in terms of what it would mean to you as a finance person in the business, or as somebody who's marketing services that's telecommunications or communications related. Thank you. So I'll quickly take you through the journey, history of telecom, and where they were and where we are seeing it going now. For decades, we have always been seeing fixed line phones in homes, local long distance. I'm not sure some of you, but definitely I've been seeing 25, 30 years ago, it used to take us about 1 or 2 years to make an application and then get a line lucky if you're in a city. And if you're in a rural place, you just don't even get that. You go to a village head office or you go to the nearest town to make a phone call and see where you are today, right? So that's the journey, the way I see it. Yeah. You people are in your generation today, you're used to an iPhone. If you don't have it for a day, I know what it means to you, but we had, in our generations, telecommunications was not a necessity, it was a luxury. Today, I'm sure it's a need, right? It's an absolute necessity for you. So, what evolved after fixed phone lines? We've gone on to data communications. You had networks that gave you the ability to use private and public networks, and for us it was internet, access to internet to do a lot of things. Again, as when internet started, it was a nice to have thing. It connected you to the globe, gave you access to a lot of information, but see how it's changed now. Mobile communications. The evolution in mobile communications from where we were to where we're going, right? You are experiencing something in the middle of 2G and 3G. And imagine the services that you would get as we move to 4G and have better coverage across the country. And from an enterprise or a large corporation standpoint, voice over IP is becoming very predominant in running voice in the companies. You're no longer using ports. You're no longer using voice as a telephone. You're using voice as an IP service. Yeah, now that's a differentiator. That's a game changer. And then you're using IP, television over IP. So again, you're starting to see a lot of the popular day-to-day usage of communications coming in as applications on IP, right? Then collaboration tools. You're seeing a lot of collaboration tools coming in that you use today, WhatsApp and a lot of others that allow you to engage with each other on and stay connected. A lot of these are coming in as applications. So last year, this was a $5 trillion industry globally. Why? Because you moved from ports, plain on telephone system, to a situation today where you're using a lot of applications. It's integrated to your life. It's integrated to what you do. Mobile commerce, everything is pushed in through the same medium, right? You merged e-commerce with telecommunications. You merged a lot of business industry, mobile, banking. A lot of these have now got integrated into the way you run communications. So you can no longer differentiate the industry as a bank or a communications industry or any other specific application. They're all highly and tightly integrated to your daily lives, and so it's very difficult for you to identify who are the leaders or who are the players that deliver these services. So which means the possibility is any player can deliver any service, should you choose to. And telecom today is the only industry where 76% of the world population uses it. So the reach, the ability for you to make a difference is enormous. The people that use this service is huge. So if you are in the innovation side of the business, you can make a big difference to the world. So it's explosive growth, propelled both by demand pull, supply push. So what do I mean by that? Demand pull. Obviously demand is there, right? You're looking at, that's the driver. But supply push, like banking, you no longer go to bank branches, right? I remember in my days when I was going to college, I had to go to a branch and stand in front of a cashier to withdraw cash. I don't think you ever go to a branch today. You go to an ATM, right? Or today you don't need, most of your commerce, mobile commerce, you do it on your phones. So that's the kind of applications that push and that the requirement for communications and the requirement for the communication providers to get more sophisticated, to get more relevant, to start delivering more value, drive more on-demand services, right? You no longer want to be constrained by communications, the communication industry, in being able to reach your customers or potential services that you want to have access to. Today you can just get onto your iPhone, you can go into your shopping site, you can pull an application on demand. This probably was just not thinkable 10 years ago. But think about the underlying infrastructure and the amount of transformation that needed to happen for that to really work for you, right? And I think most of you, as you go into your work lives, are going to be touching some aspect of some of this business, either in operations or in finance, or if you're in management, or if you're trying to deal with sourcing, or if you're trying to identify business opportunities in the marketplace, right? All these are going to be very paramount for you. It's important for you to understand how are these so tightly integrated. So obviously it stimulates a lot of innovations and business opportunities, and that's where you come. You today carry a fresh perspective to business. So my recommendation will be, as you go into the business, do not get caught into the myriad of what's happening within the business, the limitations. You need to still stay as open as you are today to the possibilities of what can be done, right? Do not be constrained by infrastructure or certain other constraints and capacities on the ability to deliver applications. You need to stay innovative, stay foolish, stay innovative, Do not take a no for an answer. Yeah, do not allow people to tell you it's very obvious, it can't be done. Because I think at your age today, where you're learning, you're looking at the possibilities, you're looking at what can be done. Yeah. So keep that hunger and enthusiasm with you as you go into your work life. So with that, if I'm coming to what's telecommunications and what are the opportunities, I'm trying to keep it simple. So I think in today's world, communication is all about mobility and things around mobility, virtualization, cloud computing, and Internet of Things. So I'll try and quickly cover what it means in these 4 areas, and then we'll go into certain technologies specific to what's happening in the telecom world, what is transforming it and why. Yeah. So if I go to mobility, for you it's predominantly wireless, but I also know wired, because when you get back to 4G, you're again coming back to wired, Wi-Fi. So you're going to see a lot of that in the country, but currently predominantly it's mostly wireless. So I'm not sure if any of you have seen pagers, but I've lived with pagers for 5-6 years, and then we saw the mobile revolution coming in. Right? It is a sea change. So what does it mean? 1G was analog voice only, with the plain old telephone sets. So we moved from there to 2G, where you had digital voice and data. Nice, because you're also able to push data on top of voice. You had modems and you had a lot of other technologies there to help you with that. And as you move to 3G, which is what you predominantly have in the country today, you carry digital voice, data, video, internet surfing. See the difference here, digital voice. So you're no longer carrying voice as analog. You're not looking at voice anymore as a service. You're looking at it as a data service. So what differentiates 3G from 2G is also the amount of bandwidth you can carry from your phone to the cell site. So 3G is much higher than 2G. And as you move from 3G until 3G, it's very vendor-driven, proprietary. Technology is fairly complicated. Very few providers in the world manufacturing and developing those chipsets. So the cost of the technology and the cost of providing this technology as a service is pretty high. So as we move from 3G to 4G, if you see there, that's why I deliberately kept 4G in a very simple term, saying it's IP-based, high-speed mobile. So what this actually means to you in business, the proprietary nature of the business has been removed. The cost, the opportunity in 4G for us is to remove the cost out of the business. All services run, all voice services, all telecom services run as an application. That's the advantage. And is that going to be available to you day one? I don't think so, because these are very evolutionary. We are still trying to evolve from 2G to 3G. And the same, as we start rolling out 4G infrastructure, you still have 3G applications. 4G infrastructure has to stabilize. It's got to have its reach to at least 70% of the marketplace. And when you have something like that and the kind of the bandwidth and potential it has got, that's when the application will start driving your usage. You can have pacemakers in the hospitals automatically reporting back data on what's happening to the patient into a portal. And the triggers on exceptions can go back to the hospital or to the doctors or to the nurses. Yeah, there's going to be a lot more evolution happening. All that's happening probably in some parts of Europe and US, but it can take some time for India because we need the infrastructure to first come to play. That's going to change the way you look at communications, because communications is not going to be a business by itself. It's going to be a huge enabler, but it can allow the applications to take control of how fast they want to reach the marketplace. The time to reach the market can lower down drastically. So most of you are on either on Android or on Apple, and off late you also have some Windows-based smartphones coming that give you access to all these applications, right? In most part of the world, all these are provided as appliances by the service providers. Unlike in India, where you go and buy appliances, right? You have the choice. But in most of the world, these are provided by service providers, and it's packaged into your service. You do not actually pay for a phone. The phone pays for itself if you are in the service for a year or two. So I'm thinking these practices would eventually come into India as well. It's a matter of time. Because what you're really buying into when you go into a service provider is the quality of service, the trust that he is able to instill in you on what he can provide you to make your life better, to make it more consistent, to give you more seamless services, right? So it's going to be an interesting time to come by. Mobile commerce, which touched on that. Wearables, Google Glasses, smartwatches, I'm sure others must have touched on what these mean to you, right? This actually empowers you to do a lot more. And they are with you on the move, so you got information on the tap. You're always connected. Value-added service providers and app world. This is the opportunity for the country, because so far it was difficult for the value-added service providers to actually make an entry into these markets, looking at the needs of the business, needs of consumers, because they were so tightly integrated with the service providers. But as we go into 4G and as we go into the newer models of doing business, value-added service is going to be key to be providing you the kind of services you want. It will de-link the infrastructure from the applications. And it also drastically reduces the cost of entry barrier for providing innovation into the marketplace. This is creating tremendous pressure on the infrastructure. If a new application is rolled out in the mobile infrastructure, and if you like it, from nowhere to somewhere, from nowhere to 2,000 clicks or 3 million downloads in 2 weeks is a huge ask on the infrastructure. So unlike the conventional telecom infrastructure, the challenges for the mobile infrastructure now is to keep up with the pace and demand of what the mobile applications demand between the providers and you, the users. So there is a lot of requirement for on-demand, a huge surge of availability of these services. You would not be patient enough to be able, if a download takes you more than 2 minutes, right? You want it back there in 2 seconds or 3 seconds. Probably it's at 40 seconds today, but they would want to go down to 2 seconds or 3 seconds. But think, what does it mean to the provider? What does it mean to the infrastructure? What do they need to do at the back end to actually create that kind of availability to you? Those are the opportunities. If I touch on virtualization, unknown to us, back in 1978, the first journey towards virtualization started, which was when IBM chose to de-link the hardware, the personal computers, from the software. So back then in 1978, in the picture you see Paul Allen and Bill Gates, they took on the onus of driving the operating system software independent of hardware. So the x86 started then, right, the hardware for PCs. And if we look at the evolution of x86 of the 1978s and the x86 of today, the compute power of that platform has gone up 10,000 times. The NIC card in x86 back in 1978 used to be 10 meg. Today you got them at 10 gig, again 10,000 times. So you're seeing that the compute powers have gone up 10,000 times. The networking speeds have gone up 10,000 times. And the costs remain flat or lower. So ours is the only industry where you, year on year, you improvise, you bring in more innovation, and you actually drop the cost. You don't drive up the cost. But how does it make sense, business sense? Even when you drop the cost, you're increasing adaptation. And you're increasing usage. So it's a fine balance. And what did this do actually? It decoupled the hardware from software. So a PC became a PC, you could buy from anywhere, it's hardware. An operating system stayed as an operating system, so they're totally independent. So when you have independent hardware and independent software, it allowed application developers to develop applications that were universally available. So which is what we saw from 78 to now, right? Before 78, you would go to an IBM or a DEC having proprietary hardware, proprietary operating systems, proprietary applications, and the reach into the market was not so high as now because they were all tightly integrated. The service provider had to envisage what kind of usage the market needed. It's very limited. They're not very innovative. But when it decoupled all this, the application provider suddenly had a platform where if they identify a need in the market, they could go and create an application, and the PCs running standard operating systems were available. So they were able to penetrate the market very fast. So that really started the virtualization drive back in 78. So what does virtualization provide you? It provides you a shared pool and optimizing resource utilization. You need lesser hardware footprint. It's eco-friendly. You're no longer tying down people to a personal hardware, right? Hardware can be anywhere. Hardware can be virtual. It can be used on demand. That's the power of virtualization. So obviously the finance and business economics of moving towards virtualization were high, were huge. But why couldn't we do this back in 1978? Because you did not have the connectivity, the network infrastructure to virtualize. If you leave all compute and storage in some central location, then people should be able to seamlessly access them, right? That's a fundamental precinct. So that is something that has got solved over the last 2.5 to 3 decades now. So today, you are in that space. So virtualization is a reality. So today you're seeing virtualization of compute, storage, and even network is joining the bandwagon. Lower cost of ownership, higher return on investments. The cost arbitrage is attractive in this model. It's a catalyst for cloud computing. All of you are aware of where cloud computing is coming from and why it's getting so widely adopted by all the communities, the service providers as well as the developers and end users. Cloud computing. High bandwidth, high speeds, compute resources centralized and access via internet or a dedicated WAN for private clouds for enterprise. Most of you are good examples using your iPhones, using iCloud. So what you're doing there is nothing but cloud computing. That's a concept that enables what you're doing today. It provides you the flexibility, the ease of using what you want to, when you want to, and where you want to, right? That's a very powerful thing. And that's precisely why it's driving the usage. It does not need any selling. It's a very compelling, powerful business case by itself. It reduces CapEx and OpEx. Cloud computing is interesting because of the elasticity nature of the service, on demand, right? You do not lock in resources to a certain application or a certain customer. They are available on demand dynamically. And for the service provider, he is able to spread his costs on all these across, looking at the profile of the usage and manage what's best within the limited infrastructure that he's got. It's a very compelling return on investment, and this allows you to move to utility type billing, pay as you use. This is unheard of 15-20 years ago. You buy a phone, you pay a fixed cost, whether you use it or not. As you move on to the mobile phones, you have a fixed cost, and then you gotta pay as you use. And now as you start virtualizing the underlying infrastructure, that allows you to bring down your costs and in the real sense, bring it down to a utility billing model. You pay as you use. The benefit here is you do not lock capex, right? If you are a small industry, today whether you like it or not, you have to go and buy a lot of hardware, buy a lot of the applications, buy licenses. So you have a lot of capex, and you don't really understand what the real usage is for the next couple of years. So whether you use it or not, you're locked to that hardware and that capex. So this allows you to unlock that. You literally go down to no capex in the full model when the cloud starts applying in the society. This is interesting. Some of the earlier speakers must have spoken to you about the possibilities of Internet of Things, a digital world, connected appliances. So I've shown you all the things that probably can be connected by internet. This is going to drive the need for moving to IPv6. Earlier we were having a discussion on when we go and what do we do. So all these technologies are available today as a technology, but we need to drive the adoption in business, and we need to create relevant applications. And that's going to drive the need to move to a higher range of IP addresses that are required. You probably have about 4 billion IP addresses that you probably can do today using IPv4. It connects real devices. But as you start looking at the virtualized nature, and as you start connecting every device in your house, you can probably turn on your fridge, or you can turn on your heaters in the home, you can turn on your ACs before just 20 minutes before you come home, so that when you come home, you're at a pleasant temperature. You don't have to come home and then switch them on. And this is going to revolutionize things. Technology is there to make it possible, but we need the utility industry to adopt it. And from a telecom or a communications perspective, we need to bring in realistic IPv6 framework to actually allow you to have a lot of these things connected. And any business case is only as good as what it actually does to somebody. It has to make something easy. It has to solve some real life problems today. It has to make patient care, it has to improve patient care from where it is today. It has to make doctor's life easier. It has to give a doctor more time, give him a personal life. Today I think the doctors are the most stressed lot. They're stuck to the hospitals. They're not really sure what's happening in the patients. They keep calling back. But imagine if all that equipment that's stuck to the patient in the ICU is actually talking back to the doctor. It's not just talking back to the doctor, but it's only giving the doctor the relevant information that he seeks. He may have certain thresholds. When they pass, he wants to know. So he gets that. Or he may have that information available to the nursing departments in the hospitals, saying, when you see these, take these decisions. So what you're actually seeing is the evolution of machine-to-machine interfaces is going to happen on the internet. And that's going to be explosive. That's going to change your lives. Just like the way the iPhones and the mobile phones have changed the way you live your lives today, the Internet of Things is going to be the next step that's going to change your lives in further. It's going to make things a lot easier. It's going to make commerce very seamless, very easy. You literally do not have to go wait anywhere for anything. Everything can be connected. Everything is communicating. Machine, your all virtual devices that you use will be communicating back. Your fridge, when it sees that the vegetable section is empty, could probably be ordering vegetables and the vegetable mart. It may be swiping your card. Things get very seamless. So what does it mean to you? It means today you're spending a lot of your time on groceries and a lot of other things. You could be setting up certain rules, and based on which a lot of this commerce could be happening automatically. And the Internet of Things is the technology behind allowing this machine-to-machine communication, which means as service providers, we need to make real infinite compute power, storage, access, so that all this can seamlessly happen. Right? And this would really make location-based services more attractive. And also, it will create a new market. If location-based services are attractive and realistic and reliable from a communication standpoint, then it means that when you're passing a mall, the system understands your profile, your buying patterns, and it can actually push a lot more relevant information saying, hey, we got this new brand coming up here, interested, would you want to have a look? And that's coming because the system somewhere knows you're passing that area, right? So a lot of these possibilities become reality once the infrastructure around Internet of Things starts working and reaches a critical mass and is reliable. And that will again fuel the next set of applications, a revolutionary trend of how to run business. So targeted services is one of the things. And in order for all this to happen, how do you do it? I mean, there's so much of data, right? There's so much of data being processed. There's so much of data being gathered. So now what the next big thing that you need is analytics. How do you analyze a lot of this data? And what are you trying to make out of the data? What is the data telling you? How do you use it? And if a lot of the data is in real time, how do you push it back that it can be used in commerce, it can be used in applications? If I'm walking a mall, it probably doesn't take me more than 30 seconds to walk past a place. So within 30 seconds, how is some data of mine being processed and being made available to some potential sale that's able to push that information back to me, right? This is a challenge. And this is what is fueling a lot of network bandwidth requirements, availability of storage and compute, right? All these today are still sounding theoretical. These are to some extent being utilized in Japan. I think I've seen it in certain cities in the US, but large proliferation would happen in India as well in times to come by. Once you roll out 4G, a lot of these will define how do you move on to the next steps. It's going to actually change the way application providers look at how to deliver applications to the consumer as well. So now I must excuse, this is more technical in nature. I didn't, for many of you it not be all that interesting, but nonetheless it's good for you to understand the underlying principles. Just as we talked about cloud computing, where it virtualized compute and storage, the networks have realized that they need to fall in line now, right? So two standards have been defined in the networks now that will drive how networks support the virtualization and the big push towards mobile computing. One is called SDN. Yeah, it's going to be a paradigm shift, the way we run communications going forward. It's going to be nothing like what we've been doing so far. It's software-defined networking. I just took a simple, it's not really a simple example. If you look at today how large networks that support your mobile and enterprise networks look like, they're all discrete devices sitting up there providing various functionality to deliver what you're seeing today on your mobile phones or on your applications, or for an enterprise on how their enterprise voice and data requirements are run, how is the security infrastructure run. Yeah? So this is a typical example of how it is done today. Every physical device in the network today has 4 layers. It's got a control layer, it's got a control plane, it's got a data forwarding plane, there is a management plane, and there is a services plane. Every device that you see, these are the 4 planes that sit in every device. So if there are 5 trillion devices in the marketplace today, every device has these 4 planes. So you got 4 trillion control planes. So what is SDN about? So what SDN is saying is that delink the data plane from the control plane. Do not let the control plane reside in every physical device within your infrastructure. So you effectively take your control plane into the cloud, and you take your control plane into standard hardware. We discussed x86. You could have x86 and use standard operating systems, Linux-like operating systems, open hardware, open software, and develop the control applications on top of the platform. So your forwarding planes are only going to do pure data forwarding. This is very relevant to a service provider. Having millions of devices, doing complex control and service processing, and also trying to forward data is a very complex business, and that's what is happening today. So what this means to some of you here is, this is a lot of cost. The capex that goes into such a model pre-SDN is very high. The return on investment is very low, right? So SDN for a non-technology person is low cost of investment, high return on investment, low cost of capital. And also on the data plane, if you see today, they're very complex. There are a lot of complex routing decisions or switching decisions that need to take because of the distributed nature of how we run our businesses today. Because all the 4 planes reside in every physical device. But as you move to SDN, you see the second layer here moves, and that's what it looks like. So SDN really allows you to move into a command and control mode where anybody who's got an innovative idea can come and apply his innovation in the control plane, and that would be applicable and available across the data plane. Across. In the past, if any of us had great telecom ideas of how you could make a difference, you could only go and just suggest that to a big service provider. He may or may not use it. He has his own reasons. But in this model, as we move towards SDN, if you got a great idea, it can actually be implemented. The cost barriers are literally nil. Whatever you're doing today is on standard hardware. You're using standard operating systems, right? So in the future, this is how you would see any network, whether it's a mobile operator or an enterprise. So at the control layer, you would see all the network control protocols that allow you to run your businesses. And all these are being delinked from appliances. So you're bringing down the cost of your network by about 40 to 50%. And SDN controllers that drive the control plane have 2 interfaces. They actually now start talking to the application world on APIs. So the SDN, which is the telecom or communication side of the business, actually provides APIs for the business to be able to negotiate what they want out of the network. They want more bandwidth. They want more bandwidth because they're getting more download requests from the mobile app. They can request that. So all your on-demand services from the networks can be available on the tap. So what takes you today a couple of months to a couple of weeks will become online. This is revolutionary. And also what happens here is, for the telecom world, for the mobile world, a lot of these are linked to your billing systems, right? To your package, the kind of service you have. So the authentication, the security parameters of what you can and can't do. So all these get linked because all these things now are defined and run as a software. It's just enough for you to understand that SDN is going to remove a lot of the complications arising in the business today on account of communications. That's going to go away. Communication is no longer going to be the bottleneck of your ability to go into the market. And as you start seeing on the layer below, infrastructure layer, you're just seeing white boxes, right? Series of x86 servers, storage available on a per unit basis in data centers that can drive all your requirements, right? You're soon going to be at a point where you do not need any storage on your phones. It's all going to be coming to you centrally. When you power up your phone will power up with some virtual appliance in the data center, in the cloud. And similarly in campus networks, campuses are moving more from the wired to wireless. So as you no longer lock to your classrooms to the NIC port that's given to you. As you go on into the wireless world in campus, everything is being unlocked. You can move from rooms to rooms, you can move across the campus, you still stay connected. And as we move on to 4G, your voice and video also stay connected. You're talking to people, you're moving from cell to cell, but the intelligence is there in the control plane to understand that the seamless transfer of that data has to happen for you. You don't drop. You need better quality of voice, you need better video, you want to stay connected. You're running applications, you're doing your business, or if in a campus, you're doing a lot of your class work, you can keep moving. It shouldn't be interrupted. You're speaking. Let's say you're on an interview. You're doing all this through the same instrument. You do not need different instruments to talk, to take video conference calls, to be on applications. Everything can be tightly integrated. A lot of what I'm saying is actually available, but what I think all of us are interested in is trying to see how soon can 30 or 40% of the population in the country get the usage, get this benefit. Because once you have this infrastructure available to you in the country, it throws enormous possibilities on applications, in the business, e-commerce. It changes the way you do business. It removes the middleman. It makes it a lot easier. Time to market goes up. You can introduce concepts into the market much faster. So if I look at products and technology of the future, so for the technical people in you, we're decoupling the planes, standard software defined protocols, decoupling of software and hardware. So the development in software and hardware can be independent of each other. They do not have to be depending on each other as they are today. Shorter life cycles, development life cycles with software. So you can introduce new concepts very faster because it just has software. You do not have to worry about the underlying hardware. You'd still need standalone appliances because there could still be certain niche mission critical needs that could only be met by standalone appliances. So we need to recognize that and we need to continue to nurture that. Network infrastructure would be virtualized 100%. The next time somebody has to refresh their equipment, they would go onto in a virtualized infrastructure. More reliance on controllers and configurations via APIs. So a lot of you that are in software development will understand this. Today, network is Greek and Latin to most of them in the software world because it doesn't interact with the network, with the application. But once you provide an API to an application, they don't need you, right? You're giving them the control of the network, and which is what is needed. So, and hardware providers, there will be multiple hardware providers and there will be multiple software vendors. They're independent. So this allows healthy competition and allows the best to come out in the marketplace. It's no longer going to be run in a cartel-like fashion or in a regulated manner. Services of the future. On the services front, think this is my guess. We're thinking it'll be mostly converged, wired, wireless, and bring your own devices, network infrastructure. By the time most of you are at work, you'll be carrying your own devices. You'll not be carrying a laptop like what we've been doing. You don't need a laptop. Data center services, hosting environments, applications running business logic. So everything is going to be run out of data centers. So there's a lot going to happen in the data center environment. There's a lot of transformation that's needed in the data centers, and that's an opportunity for a lot of you to look at how the current data centers are run, what's the ROI, what are the challenges they have. And as we virtualize and as we move to cloud compute, how do we carefully take them through that migration transition to public and private clouds to provide infrastructure and products as a service. Network function services. There will be a huge amount of virtualization in the network functions, which today are run in a very decentralized manner using appliances, costing you 15 to 20 times the real nature of value should you virtualize them. So as you move down the virtualization path, you're going to drop a lot of cost down. And as you drop a lot of cost, you're passing that benefit to the products, to the end user, to the customers, right? So this allows the customer to not worry about the cost and seamlessly use whatever he's using. Today he's worried, have I reached my 2 GB limit? I don't want to go beyond that, right? All this will go away because as we build more relevant, cheaper, faster infrastructure, the cost goes away, and that cost the cost benefits can be transferred to the customer and the applications he's using. And so what happens to the professional services that are provided in future? We'll be linking network and applications by defining a virtualization layer that maps end-to-end network transport requirements and application needs. Why am I saying this? This is not there today. You have got a great application, but you may be looking bad in the market because of a provider that's not giving you the right treatment. A great application without a great underlying infrastructure hurts you today. That's because there's no linkage. But I can assure you, going forward, they'll be tightly linked, and you can just have one function that's accountable for the quality of service that you're delivering to the customer end to end. That's a strong statement in terms of adoption of services. The reason a lot of services do not get adopted today is because the end user experience is not measurable. The network is independent of the applications. So that's the biggest challenge, and that will go away. And then design concepts, specifying policies and enabling enforcement from central locations is a lot easier than today. Today, it takes the most complex algorithms to try and deliver some of these solutions to the customers. But as you centralize, all the problems will go away. Creating new service opportunities like integration and transformation support. These are going to be new areas, new jobs that you're going to be seeing in the near future as we move towards SDN. Because now you're going to be looking at networking and communications as an application, as an underlying application to the application providers. This I thought would be interesting to you, which is why I tried to put some thought into it. Skills of the future. Technical skills, again, I'm sorry, I'm still sticking to the technology area here. I think security is going to be important. IPv6, quality of services in a SDN environment, domain name services, APIs. A lot of networking professionals in the market today are very vendor driven. They are very focused on being able to use command line interfaces from vendors like Cisco and Juniper. They are more vendor centric, but going forward, I would urge you all to be vendor agnostic and stay more focused on technology. And all of you in the technology side will have to adopt and learn software skills. You're no longer going to be using command line interfaces to run your business. You've got to be comfortable C, C++, Java, Python. These are going to be required for you. When you want to test some concepts, you're going to create your own programs to do it. You're not going to have a separate IT department doing that for you. I'm sure all of you are familiar with Nike, right? Nike. Yeah. Nike last year did away with their IT department. They went in for Google Apps. Every Nike employee today has a unique ID on Gmail. So you don't need to go back to an IT department within your organization. Collaboration is becoming so intense and required that people like Google are actually targeting large customers where they can provide them seamless collaboration and at the same time not having to have a high cost of support, expenses on migrating to newer applications. You pick them up from Google, you pick them up from the net. Upgrades become seamless. New features get introduced, you don't even know that there is an outage. That's not something that I can talk of in today's environment. But soon you'll see that most of the corporations and most of the consumers, you'll be getting services that are seamless to you. Upgrades will be seamless. Migration of underlying infrastructure to support your new requirements will happen in a manner that does not disrupt your services. Today, a lot of time and energy is spent on change management because every time you want to introduce a new feature or a new technology or a new application, it's disruptive. It stops your services. So all this is going to change because of SDN. And that's why I needed you people to understand what SDN is all about. It's going to make life a lot easier for the end consumer, for the customers. A lot of what happens underneath to provide them newer applications closer to their needs is going to be so seamless. And there'll be a lot of push technology pushing in the newer applications, the newer images of the newer requirements within the existing applications you use. So the others that could be of interest to you will be IT governance, technical project management, cloud computing technologies, big data. By big data, I mean analytics. You people need to start building up some skills around analytics. How do you actually create that big picture from that billion terabytes of data that's sitting in front of you and give it to a business saying, hey, this is what your data is telling you. You know what? Nobody does that today. Nobody can take all the data and tell a business, this is what your data is telling you. That's a vacuum in the market today. So the opportunity is to get there. When you got a marketing campaigning happening, are you able to with very definitively tell him, this is what you can expect there? But believe it or not, the data is there. The data is there between a provider, in storage. Every time a user is using his phone, something is telling you something, right? Trends, what he's using, what he's buying, what he's not buying. So a lot of this is required for decision making, for the people in the front line who need to take their decisions. So big data analytics, in my mind, is a big, big, big plus for some of you who want to take that line. So what are the soft skills? More critical thinking. Life is no longer easy. Devices and services are no longer real. Everything is virtual. So you need complex thinking, critical thinking, complex problem solving. And what's looking very easy today actually requires a good amount of consulting, which means consulting comes from business knowledge, bridging the gap between the business requirements and the technology available. So these are the areas I can see are opportunities and skills for the future on the technical and the soft side of the nature for you. And I've shared my contact details with you. So should you need to, I know I've had very short window to reach out to you on a lot of things, but if you people need to continue to work on these areas and you want to check, take a second opinion with me on some of the things that you're looking at, or if you're working on some projects where you think you want a second opinion, or you want to see whether it makes sense, the bigger context, please feel free to reach out to me. I can either respond or I can connect you to the people that could work closely with you on these. And I think I'll open up for questions.
Sir, do Skype and Hangout will took over normal calls and SMS? What are its future prospects?
See, innovation will prevail at the end of the day. And most innovations will be disruptive. When I mean disruptive, they're probably eating into revenues of some not so innovative providers today. So what you are describing is a journey. Eventually, you do not control the behavior of users, right? Why do users go for Skype or something? Convenience.
Yes, sir.
Now, should a service provider be able to provide that? Would they not take it from him? They would. But the fact is, the service providers are not in that space. So what I can see two scenarios. The service providers are cash cows. They have the ability to buy out such applications and provide that because they find that the customer no longer wants SMS.
Yes,
He wants to use Skype. He wants to use WhatsApp. He wants to use other kinds of collaboration between their own groups, right? So you would find the service providers giving you these eventually. There may be some back-end agreements between the application providers like Skype and others to provide them through this. Do I answer your question?
Yes, sir.
No. See, whenever you introduce something new, it's going to be disruptive.
Yes, sir.
So the existing providers will fall behind regulators and others. There will be arm twisting tactics, but that will not prevail. Eventually, innovation will prevail.
Yes, sir.
Yeah?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Myself Lalit Tikle. Welcome to BITM College, sir. Good evening. So my question is that, sir, recently AT&T was in news that it make a deal with Viom. So my question is that what are the key areas that AT&T is going to focus on to serve the Indian customer, because our service provider have a spectrum in some areas, 3G, such kind of technology are 3G and 4G, but we are not aware of this. So how does AT&T is going to serve our Indian customers?
See, currently AT&T is not in the consumer space in India, right? They may come into the business by one or two ways. One way could be through acquisition. they may acquire a dominant mobile operator and then try and start providing traditional services through that operator. Or the other could be through a partnership with an existing operator. So because India is not a market that one can ignore anymore, right? India is one of the dominant emerging markets, India and China. It used to be Brazil, Russia, India, China. But Brazil doesn't seem to be really in the race. Russia doesn't seem to be interesting enough. So India, China definitely are countries that cannot be ignored from a consumer perspective. So I think it's going to be a matter of time, but I would also caution it may not happen soon enough. Because these things have a lot of regulatory and compliance implications as well. So the government has obligations and constraints of protecting the interests of the current operators that have paid them a lot of license fee. Yeah. So when the operators pay a license fee, the government is also guaranteeing them a certain set of customers and a certain set of revenues. So looking at all that, if the government hopefully agrees at some point, you'll see some more foreign operators, including AT&T, come into play. And I'm thinking also that they'd also not be very keen on getting into the market in the next year or two. They would like to see the evolution of the technology, move towards virtualization, move towards cloud, reduce the capex within the current space to deliver services. And as 4G takes more adoption, that's when it makes it more interesting for a lot of operators, including AT&T, to come into the market. I'm thinking 2 years plus. Thank you. See, a good question. Why does regulation exist? See, regulators don't exist just in India. You have a TRAI equivalent in every country. They are there to take care of the interests of the consumers in the country, right? And also to ensure fair play, and also to ensure that they are all operating within the laws of the land. And especially in India, you know, like in most of the other countries, you pay for spectrum, you pay for a license to operate. So obviously TRAI plays the role of a coach or a referee. So most often what happens is some of the operators come in without having paid the required licenses, but find a smart technology workaround to provide a service. But like you said, no, it will definitely improve his return on investment or a faster time to market. But it shortchanges the other people who played the rules by the game, who paid for spectrum, who paid for a license to operate in the country, right? So TRAI has a role to play to protect the interests of the legitimate providers who have chosen to operate in the country, and also to protect the interests of all the citizens in the country. If a certain operator is only wanting to go into their niche markets and provide services only to those people who are able to pay for more than $3,000 per month on a service, TRAI would not like that. So the reasons are more national interests in mind, and to assure you, this is not an India only problem. This problem exists everywhere, including the US. And in fact, this problem is more acute in Europe. Does that clarify? Okay.
Hello. Excuse sir. Sir here. This side.
Yeah.
Good evening, sir. My name is Shekhar. I'm from SBS Operations. Today, recently, I heard about that AT&T is providing gigabit service to land on Google turf. AT&T is taking gigapower to California. It plans to make Cupertino to receive its first 1 GB service UVerse fiber optic broadband service. The strategy brings the faster service to places where residents can afford the service. But don't you think it has raised concern that poorer and rural areas will get left behind in digital development?
No, I don't think so, because this is the first advantage. You have to start someplace, right?
Yeah.
The reason we started in Cupertino is to let Google know that we are not behind.
Okay.
And obviously, AT&T being a national carrier in the US has interests and obligations of serving the entire landscape of the US. But that may take time. And the underlying technology that's being used there was what I just discussed.
Yes, I saw that, yeah.
And obviously what it means to the customer is you're getting gigabit at a cost that's less than what you're currently paying for your current service.
Broadband service.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Thank you very much.
Evening, sir. Yeah. We spoke about bring your own device network infrastructure. Corporates use this method of containerization to separate or isolate the corporate data using a hypervisor. Can you tell us how actually it works? Do you containerize or isolate the corporate data?
See, the hypervisor you're referring to sits in the control plane. As I said, as we start delinking the control plane, so what you do in the enterprise world is you do not leave any of the corporate data on your local system. If you take a laptop today, a lot of my corporate data, including my mail, sits on my laptop. When we go to BAOD, you actually go through the hypervisor which you refer to, which is a middleware that sits in the cloud, and that once it authenticates you, it knows that you are an authentic employee, you have access to all that, you have access to X number of resources. It opens that up to you. But what happens is all your data, corporate data, is stored in the corporate world, while your personal data on your mobile phone is on your phone. So that way what happens is you can use your phone for your personal use, but whenever you want to go into your office use, you got a client or the hypervisor sitting on your phone. You activate that, it authenticates, which is a fraction of a second, and then you're onto your Microsoft Office, you're looking at your mails, you can go to applications within your space that you're working in the corporation. It's a middleware. And all that is possible because of the world moving towards cloud computing, right? And why are we doing this? Why are they moving? Why are they ensuring that BYOD? It's convenience, right? Today, the cost of owning a smartphone is not even a talking subject. But 10 years back, probably even the cost of owning a phone used to be a talking subject. It's so expensive, right? So in a corporate world, what is so different from the corporate data from a personal data? Security, right? The corporation is very hyper about security. It does not want the wrong people to access any corporate data. So that security is imbibed in the hypervisor. So the security authenticates you as a legitimate employee, authenticates you in terms of the services that you are allowed to have access to, right? And then it allows you to get that access. It's convenience, right? You're dramatically bringing down the cost of delivering the service. You're building tremendous amount of convenience. You're building mobility, right? It does not lock you to the office space in that cubicle or in that seat anymore, right? You could be wherever you are and you're on work. Your productivity dramatically increases. And opportunities of collaboration improve tremendously. You could be sitting in a coffee shop and transacting business, right? And for all that you need BIOD, you need your own device. That is not possible today in most of the corporations where they do not have BIOD. I may have a conversation in a coffee shop, but I may have to go back to my office to go fulfill the transaction. That's not required. So the needs are real, right? Making it more convenient. Do I answer your question? Thank you.
Good evening, sir.
Hi.
So I'm Rohan from operations batch. So in BE, I did a project on cognitive radio. So in which, by mutual collaboration of 2 or more telecom companies, so we can enable them to share each other's bandwidth. So by sharing each other's bandwidth, the problem of bandwidth can be solved by if power goes below a certain decibel level, the telecom company will, BST will detect it and switch over to the other operator. So how can I relate this to SDN, sir? How I can put this model into SDN? Because, sir, this has not been implemented. This concept is very old and is not implemented in the world. So why it has not been implemented and how can I put this in SDN model?
Deutsche Telekom, Telstra, Verizon have already started looking at SDN on the optics. So the optics is communicating back to the application or the management layer using APIs. So whatever is said right now can be controlled from a central plane using APIs. Today, since you do not have APIs, you are creating some physical interfaces to identify the thresholds and then give them an appliance to do that. So, but tomorrow what happens instead is you can run it through the network management plane. Network management today is very element driven, but network management tomorrow is going to be, it's going to give you a business view, an operations view, where if I go to the operations view on the network management plane, I can find out that I have got a high bandwidth usage in one provider and low on the other, and then I can ask for load balance. And I use the appropriate APIs, and those commands allow you to do that. It makes it a lot easier as we move towards SDN. Because what you did today was fairly complex. You had to go and understand optics.
Yes, sir.
You had to understand RF.
Yes, sir.
You had to understand tuning, thresholds.
Yes, sir. Threshold, yes, sir.
But when you go to SDN, you don't need to understand all that.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, all you need to do is look at how you want to balance your data.
Yes, sir.
And you define your parameters.
Okay.
And then you have APIs coming from the relevant providers. So that API, when you give the command, they will go and do that automatically.
Okay, sir.
So this is the journey to happen. It's not happened yet.
Okay, sir.
The providers that I told you that are already doing what you are just
Yes, sir,
described
I got it, sir.
is Deutsche Telekom and
Very
Telstra.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Hello, good evening, sir. First of all, I would like to
Good evening, sir.
Hi.
Sir, we have read that in that assessment center concept was started from AT&T company in the starting. So I would like to know that was this assessment center in AT&T was for all the levels or for some specific level, and what was the reason that AT&T thought for this assessment center?
Can you elaborate on the definition of the assessment center?
Assessment center, they look for GD and management games, interview and extempore and some other.
I got it. Yeah, thank you. This was initially for the US only, but last year onwards we are now trying to take this across to the other geographies as well. In fact, in India probably we are getting the rules defined so that from next year we probably can start implementing that in India as well. See, what we realized is over the last 10-15 years things have changed. Where you're getting work done has changed. 20 years back, people would fly from all over the world to the US if there was work in the US. Today, work from US flies to that part of the world where the skills lie, right? So it's become necessary for the company to recognize these realities, understand where our markets are, where our key markets are, where our key suppliers are, where the key labor markets are, right? And even for manufacturing, if you see, it's not just one location. They manufacture in all the possible places where they can leverage the benefits. Subcomponents get manufactured in different places. Some of the subcomponents require high level of technology, so they get the technology and development for that gets done elsewhere. So this recognition is required when we start assessing how we want to run our business, what skills we need. When we bring in people with technology and management skills into the business, we need them to recognize these symptoms, because no longer you're working with people in the same room. No longer you're working with people that are within your organization, right? You're working with people from different organizations, different geographies, but on the same cause. So this assessment model was actually conceived 15 years back, and it was very US-centric, but from last year we're now trying to bring it to the other geographies. Do I answer your question? Thank you.